This is a CBC News special report.
How do you remember? Is it a place? A moment? The memory of a face? For more than 75 years, Canadians have remembered here, a memorial built to honor single acts of bravery, a place of commemoration for the soul of a nation. It is here that Canadians remember the soil of Vimy Ridge, the beaches of Normandy, the mountainsides of Afghanistan. It is here that we recall the sacrifices of all Canadians who have served in the past and honor those just fallen in the shadow of yesterday. It is here that Canadians turn together on this day to remember. And you're looking live now at the National War Memorial in Ottawa. You know, to some, this is the soul of our remembrance as a nation. And today, thousands, if not tens of thousands, will be gathering here in the next hour as we approach the 11th hour of the 11th month. And we pause to remember those who have fallen in this country's name in past conflicts, and those who have served for Canada in past conflicts. Just a sense of the crowd that is gathering here, and we're still really an hour away from the major part of this ceremony. And good morning, I'm Peter Mansbridge. In the days leading up to Remembrance Day this year, here in the nation's capital, there had been much concern about what the weather would be like, that it was going to be rainy, possibly snowy, and quite cold. It is none of those. It's turned out to be a spectacularly beautiful day for a day of remembrance, and that obviously will have some impact on the crowd. But no one forgets what happened here just a few weeks ago, and as a result, almost everywhere you look, on the ground, in the air, on top of buildings, there are signs of far increased security than we've ever seen at an event like this before. They are expecting, as we said, a crowd in the tens of thousands. There have been some estimates in the 60 to 80,000 range, which would be enormous considering last year, which was a very big crowd, was around 30,000. But we'll see how things develop over the next hour or so. It will be a special ceremony, as these always are. Today in attendance, the Prime Minister, the Governor-General, the Princess Royal, that's Princess Anne, the Queen's daughter, second oldest child of the Queen and the Duke of Edinburgh. Princess Anne will be here, and she will be speaking for a few remarks. Big anniversary this year, 75th anniversary of the memorial itself, and the 100th anniversary of the beginning of the First World War. With me today, as he has been on many of these occasions in the past, the CBC's former senior correspondent, Brian Stewart, covered many a conflict over his time as a journalist, now the Distinguished Fellow at the Munk Centre at the University of Toronto. When we talk about crowd size, I think everyone knows that this is different this year for a number of reasons. We mentioned the anniversaries, but particularly because of what happened here a few weeks ago. But crowd size is quite something. When you and I were young reporters in this city covering Parliament Hill and Remembrance Days in the 1970s, they'd be lucky to get 1,000 people out here.
They'd be lucky to get 1,000, and we sometimes used to talk about, is this all going to die out? Do you think one day the day will come in Canada, nobody's going to bother to show up to these events? The exact opposite has started to happen. It's like a groundswell, year by year by year by year it builds. And that's, I think, is largely due to a lot of volunteer organizations right across this country that are working schools, that are bringing people together, churches and church groups at schools. And it's really having a remarkable effect. We saw it in D-Day when we were over there in June. Much larger crowds than we ever expected.
Certainly, much larger. And today, because of what happened here to Corporal Nathan Cirillo, just almost 3 weeks ago exactly, and in Quebec, a couple of days before that, to Warrant Officer Patrice Vincent, both who were killed in attacks here on home soil, there has been increased thought about Remembrance Day, especially in this city, because as we said at the top, you know, this is kind of the soul of our remembrance as a nation. That this to happen right there, standing sentry at the Tomb of the Unknown, has brought out this city in a way continuously in the days since, and in one imagines especially so today, wanting to be here and to be close. One thing I should mention right away, because this happens every year and we get a lot of emails and calls and people tweet about it. They wonder about the Union Jack. Why is it flying so prominently at the War Memorial on this day? Well, the answer is pretty simple, actually, because what happened in especially the First World War, but also at times during the Second World War, Canada fought under the Union Jack. So with this being the 100th anniversary, the beginning of the First World War, the Union Jack is in prominence on one of the major flagpoles here at the memorial. The Canadian flag is on the next flagpole that would be on the other side of your screen. But the Union Jack is very much in the shot today. It's not there because the Princess Royal is here today. It's there because Canadian troops fought and died under that flag in the First World War. Now, we have a number of reporters this week, this year, on Remembrance Day, helping us cover this story. Huge crowd, much security, a lot of things on people's minds on this day. So I want to introduce you to them. Our three reporters on the scene, starting from the left-hand side of your screen, Diana Swain and Evan Solomon in the middle, Hannah Thibodeau there on the right. Let's start off with Diana. Diana.
Peter, as you mentioned, it's a beautiful day, if a bit chilly down here, and often it's the weather that will encourage people to come out to a ceremony like this and allow them to come out. But certainly the events of the past month may have motivated even more people to come to this ceremony in this city this year. And in fact, some of the people I've been talking to lined up as much as 2 hours ago to make sure that they could secure their spot and see as much of the ceremony as possible, which is so interesting when you contrast it with what you and Brian were saying just a moment ago about small crowds. I can tell you from being down here, there are thousands of people who are here already. And this is where I'll be watching their ceremony with them today and talking to them about the ceremony, their impressions of it, and in particular, how it feels to be here in this city today.
All right, Diana, thank you. Let's get Evan in on this now. Evan Solomon, of course, the host of Power and Politics on CBC News Network. Evan?
Well, Peter, as you say, this is a more poignant November 11th. It's always very poignant, speaking with the veterans and those who serve, but because of the events of 3 weeks ago, literally right behind me, right at that standing sentry over the tomb of the unknown soldier, Corporal Cirillo, gunned down. This has taken on an added kind of poignancy. The Prime Minister cutting short his trip to China, changing his agenda, flying home. The Prime Minister's office saying it's a very important day, but it's got new importance in light of those events that really brought this home here. Justin Trudeau's also here. Thomas Mulcair will be attending a ceremony in Halifax. But the other story here, because of that, is security. Ottawa police have warned people if they see any suspicious packages or anything suspicious to report it. There's enhanced security, Peter. It doesn't take away from the feeling, but it is absolutely there, and that's a new element on this November 11th.
All right. Evan, thank you. You're absolutely right. We've seen sharpshooters on some of the nearby buildings, dogs doing a sweep of the area just in the last 30 minutes or so. Hannah Thibodeau. Hannah.
Peter, one of my favorite moments down at Remembrance Day is having the opportunity to speak with the veterans. I already spoke with some of them who came really early because they wanted to have prime seats for this Remembrance Day service. And although they're here, veterans who have taken part in World War II, other wars, they're here because they feel this Remembrance Day is different this time around. They think that more people are coming out. They feel that they have to pay tribute to those who lost their lives, including Corporal Nathan Cirillo, who was killed right here at the National War Memorial just weeks ago. So not only are they here remembering those who were lost during the other wars like World War II, but those who are taking part in the wars that are currently going on as well.
All right, Hannah, thank you. We'll be back to Hannah and Evan and Diana in the minutes and hours, actually, that follow. And in many cases, they'll be talking to some of these people. The crowds are restricted usually every year in terms of where it is they can be, given the various VIPs and the access the veterans need for this ceremony. This year, very much the same, but very closely watched by security people from the Ottawa Police, from the RCMP, from various different security groups. But in the crowd, mixture of ages, as we see every year, elderly, veterans, young people, lots of young people here, especially in the last 24 hours. We saw so many different school groups visiting the War Memorial, going up to the spot by the Tomb of the Unknown, having class pictures taken there. Very solemn moments throughout. So you've got all this happening around the National War Memorial today. It's important to remember that this day is to remember all those who've served for Canada. The memorial itself is specific in terms of what it's for. It is for those who paid the ultimate sacrifice in conflict for Canada. And when we say that, we're talking about conflicts that go back to the 19th century. So let's run down Canada's service in those wars in terms of those who lost their lives. The Boer War, 1899 to 1902, 244 killed in that war. Then we see the staggering numbers of the First World War, 14 to 18, 1914 to 1918, more than 66,000 killed over those years. The Second World War, 39 to 45, almost 45,000 killed. Just a few years later, the Korean War, 516 lost their lives wearing the Canadian uniform. From Korea, we then went through a period as a country where we were known as and performed as a peacekeeping unit in various areas around the world. But through that service, even still trying to keep the peace, Canadians lost their lives. 121 Canadian Forces members died. In Afghanistan, the conflict that went Canada's first entry in 2001, shortly after 9/11, through until 2014, 158 have lost their lives. So that's who we remember when we look at the National War Memorial. And this year there are going to be some changes. Remember, this is the 75th anniversary since King George VI dedicated this monument in 1939 and began its kind of official moments. But there are only a number of things inscribed on that monument, the dates of the First World War and the Second World War, and Korea. There are changes this year. They're going to be unveiled during the rededication service that the Governor General, the Prime Minister, and Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, will take part in today. And you'll see the new lettering and the new dates, and with those dates reflecting conflicts that hadn't until this day been on that monument. Brian, you were doing some math last night when we go through those numbers of those who lost their lives. And the final total is staggering.
It's 112,514, I believe. 112,000. just an astounding number. Really, when you think about it, we were quite a small country. You know, we went into this First World War with only 7 million people. It would be the equivalent today of losing hundreds of thousands in that war alone. And I think there are many reasons leading to today's special solemnity. Certainly the events of the last month weigh very heavily on this. But I think a lot of Canadians today, this was the year they began to come face to face with the First World War, that 100th anniversary. And they began to see that when you lose a country this size loses 66,000 people, the amount of tragedy in the homes of this country, the amount of people who've lost sons or spouses, one kind or another, it's just overwhelming. And I also think this is a time when the younger generation, through an enormous effort by volunteer groups, are really learning more about Canada's war records. Older Canadians now are doing more time looking for ancestors and looking for links in family, and more Canadians. Everywhere I've gone on these events this year, celebrating the First World War, people have come up and said, I didn't realize I had 2 uncles, 2 great uncles, and a grandfather in the First World War. And they're really coming face to face with that fact that the enormity of the war effort that Canada put forward was way beyond our weight as a country, way beyond what anyone could have expected in this country, but also the sorrow and the sadness that this country had to bear through the 20s and 30s, and then into another war where we lose over 44,000 lives. That's when this day really comes home to, that there's a lot of grief here to remember.
Right. Your point about how Canadians are kind of searching back through their own personal histories and discovering things about their families that they didn't even realize is quite interesting, because we're seeing it in the special hashtag we've got about, how I remember, and what they're doing is they're telling stories about their mothers and fathers, their great aunts, their grandmothers, great-grandmothers, and great-grandfathers. In many cases, they hadn't known about. It's kind of a vague part of their family history, but they've gone in, they're finding ways to discover these things. I remember talking to our friend David Halton about him doing his story on his dad, his new book on Matthew Halton.
That's right.
And how he searched archives, and that's what people are doing now, and finding these remarkable things in the archives, letters, home, diaries that tell the stories of the past that we didn't realize were there.
And there, after the First World War, there was a period some British historians called the Great Silence. People went very quiet about the Great War. They remembered it on days like today, but people didn't talk about their war effort much or who they had lost in their family. And so, in many ways, this has been the year that Canada's gone back and confronted its own great silence and brought the war that, when I was still very young, they used to refer to as the Great War. Not because it was great in our sense, but because it was so vast. But we have gone back as a country.
And they thought it was going to be the last war, the war to end all wars.
Absolutely.
I got to stop you here just for a second, because we're going to leap an ocean here and go across to Europe, and a specific place that meant so much to Canada in the First World War because of the losses that were suffered there and the way they still remember in Ypres, Belgium, especially at the Menin Gate, where today there was a special ceremony to remember Canadians and others who fell in the First World War. And our Nala Ayed is outside the Menin Gate as we speak now, and joins us to tell us a little bit about what we witnessed there on this day. Nala, tell us about it.
Well, Peter, this is a place that has always drawn visitors, and as you say, people looking for their own histories related to the First World War. But certainly today, there's a huge crowd of people, thousands, and obviously a large number of Canadians who are here. They attended a church service at the St. George Memorial Cathedral, where the ministers spoke not just about the sacrifices of the past, but they also talked about those of the present. And in fact, they mentioned specifically those 2 soldiers who were killed in Canada as an example. After that, there was a poppy parade, which apparently is an annual tradition, which brought lots of people, hundreds of them, over to Menin Gate to start a formal ceremony. But Peter, I wanted to tell you that in addition to the wreath layings that we saw, there was a Canadian delegation that placed a wreath, and in addition to the last post that was played, we had a moment with the head of the Last Post Association here, who has been responsible for putting on the last post every single day here, except for during the Second World War, as a thank you to all the soldiers, including the Canadians who died here. We met up with him, and he showed us 2 trumpets that were gifted to that organization by a Canadian colonel who had actually served here in Ypres in a show of gratitude for the gratitude that they show here every single day, whether there are visitors or not, to Canadians. And so you really get a sense that it's beyond just the official, it's beyond the formal ceremonies. It is also bred in the bones of the people who live here, this gratitude for all those, especially Canadians, they keep mentioning, who fought in the First World War. And
I'm so glad, Nala, that you mentioned how the playing the last post takes place every day at the Menin Gate, and it is a remarkable moment that for Canadians who visit Belgium, get a chance to go to that site. It's an emotional moment, and as Nala says, been played every day there since 1929 in memory of those who fell in the two big battles of Ypres. Many Canadians, especially in that second battle of Ypres, who lost their lives in the gas attacks at that time. So Nala Ayed joining us from Belgium. We'll let you go, Nala, as things are starting to get organized here. We're getting into the next few moments. The arrivals will start to take place. But we do have time to talk to the Chief of the Defense Staff, who's with Hannah Thibodeau now. Hannah.
Hi, Peter. I'm joined by the Chief of Defense Staff, Tom Lawson. General Lawson, there's definitely a different feel around today's Remembrance Day service.
Yeah, there is. You're right. You and I have seen the crowds growing in recent years. 10 years ago, you could get up against the fence pretty well anywhere. And I think it's a reflection of the growing support from Canadians for their men and women in uniform when they see all of the things that are being done on their behalf around the world and across Canada.
There's a lot of significance to this Remembrance Day, just being 3 weeks after the death of 2 Canadian soldiers.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Losing Nathan Cirillo right here behind us 3 weeks ago, and Adjutant Vincent then just a couple of days before that, really struck a chord with Canadians. They recognize that the threat is not only around the world, but also at home in some ways.
And how different is it this year? We're done in Afghanistan, but now we've begun airstrikes in Iraq as well. How does that factor into Remembrance Day?
Well, I think it does. I think Canadians thought that they would see their men and women in uniform less operationally deployed, and what they've seen is large numbers being deployed on behalf of Canadians, and so they see that this is probably an ongoing thing.
Chief of Defense Staff Tom Lawson, I want to thank you for your time today.
Thank you very much, Hannah.
Peter.
All right, Hannah, thank you very much. We're going to stay down by the crowd as we await the various arrivals that will start to take place in the next little while, culminating in the arrival of the Prime Minister, then the Governor General, and Princess Anne, Princess Royal, who will be a part of this ceremony, and of course, the arrival of the Silver Cross Mother. We have her emotional story to tell you coming up in the next little while as well. Let's go back, though, into the crowd. Diana Swain. Diana.
Thanks, Peter. One of the things that I've noticed as we move through the crowd today is there are a lot of young people here. I've got 3 of them with me now. They have a classmate who's actually going to be presenting a wreath during this service. This is Ben and Regan and Tori, and you've never been physically at this ceremony before. What does it mean for you to be here today?
I think it's really important for us, for us as the schools to be here and feel what it really felt like, and we can remember everything that happened and we'll never forget, and that's really important to me.
It's nice to know that we can all get together and remember, and we can feel safe all together.
Do you feel safe being here?
Yeah, I do feel safe. With all that's gone on here, it's still you can still feel safe.
It's just really special to be here on this wonderful day where we remember all those people who sacrificed themselves for us.
Thank you all. Well said. And as I mentioned, Peter, there's a real mix of people in the crowd today. We've seen some veterans, actually, who have just sort of hung on the sides as opposed to going into the center. Others who are currently serving in the forces. We've seen young families and kids from school. A real representation of Canadians so far here today.
All right, Diana, thank you. We have talked about security throughout this program since we've signed on. It's very obvious today and for obvious reasons, but let's get a little more detail on it. And somebody who can answer those questions is with Evan Solomon right now. Evan.
Thanks, Peter. I'm joined now by Chief Charles Bordelot, the Chief of Police in Ottawa. And obviously in the wake of the events not 3 weeks ago, Chief, things have changed here. What security measures are in place on this November 11th that make this different?
Well, first and foremost, we're here to honor the courage and service of the men and women who serve across overseas for us. But you'll see an increase in police officers' presence here, and we've increased the number based on the events that took place here in Ottawa, our nation's capital, and we felt it prudent to decrease those numbers. There's no specific threat to the event, but we wanted to ensure that the public knew that we were here, there was a presence, and that we wanted to make sure that things rolled out safely for everybody.
And you know, Chief, you've actually told people in Ottawa if there's anything suspicious, obviously they should report it. I mean, the events took place as people were watching literally right behind us, and I noticed that even here, even before today, there was an increased police presence. Is that right?
Absolutely. We've increased the number of officers that are here in uniform, wearing fluorescent vests, and they'll be watching the crowds, and if anybody sees anything suspicious, not to hesitate to approach one of the officers.
You know, there was that notion that for the men and women who serve not to wear a uniform when they're off duty at certain times, but today's a different day. Everyone's in uniform and wearing it very proudly, I might add. Have any of your officers, and I know I've spoken to the RCMP, have any of them expressed a desire to make sure they're present today?
Absolutely. We have a number of volunteers that are here as well. They want to make sure they want to contribute and they want to help commemorate and honor those who have served.
All right, Peter, that is Chief Charles Bordelot, and as you can see, there is absolutely more security here. You see it on the rooftops, you see it all over the place here, but again, the key here, not to let the security get in the way of what's about to happen. Back to you, Peter.
All right, Evan, thank you very much. We see the various groups who will be in attendance and on parade here at the National War Memorial starting to arrive in the immediate area. You see them there. There will be a formal march past and parade following the ceremony at the War Memorial, and we will be watching that, of course, and being able to hear the pomp and pageantry of it. Right now, though, they are just arriving and staging, getting into the various staging areas around the memorial itself. Once again, the weather absolutely stunningly gorgeous here for a mid-November day in the nation's capital. It's totally unpredictable here at this time of year. It couldn't be snow, it could be rain, it couldn't be quite cold. But today, all the indicators are good ones for this service taking place here in the nation's capital. So they're in the basic march pattern now as the various groups begin to align themselves around the National War Memorial. I want to talk a little bit about what we'll have coming up. There's Justin Trudeau, one of the political figures from Parliament Hill, who will be here. As we said, the Prime Minister will be arriving in about 15 minutes or so, followed by the Governor General, followed by Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, who is here visiting Canada for a couple of days. I think she flies out tonight, but she is here for the rededication of the National War Memorial. Remember, it was first dedicated in 1939 by her grandfather, King George VI, Queen's father. Wow, they are still figuring out the audio system here as everybody gets in position. The various cadets from the different forces and the forces themselves. Now, I was going to mention, prominent on the monument, as you can see, the dates there facing us, 1914 to 1918, the Great War, as Brian called it. That is what it was called in the years following the First World War. Because in so many ways people thought there could never be anything as barbaric as what happened during those years. It was a brutal war. Where those on both sides died in huge numbers. We have tried, because of this anniversary year, 100 years since the start of the First World War, for a very special documentary tonight that will run at 8 o'clock, 8:30 in Newfoundland, across CBC television. We have put together a special program that looks at the story of that war through the words of 3 of Canada's soldiers. We found those words in their diaries. And we traced their travels from different places in Canada to England for training and then to France and Belgium for the battles that took place. But it also takes us underground at Vimy Ridge into the tunnels that had never been opened before to television cameras to get a glimpse of what happened in that area. These tunnels, these aren't the tourist tunnels that one can visit at Vimy. These ones are closed off. They're in pretty rough shape, as you can see, and there have been collapses over the years. They were only really discovered about 10 years ago, but it was made secure enough that they allowed us to go in June. And part of the story we tell tonight is the story of those tunnels and the Canadian connection to them. The Canadians used this to get between the trenches instead of going over the top, which had become such a brutal part of the First World War. So that part of the story is fascinating, but there's lots more to the documentary tonight. So if you get a chance, you might want to either catch it when it's on, 8 o'clock, 8:30 in Newfoundland, or figure out a way to record it so you can watch it later. It's a good one, Canada's Soldier. Let's go back into the crowd. Diana Swain is with us again. Diana.
Peter, I want to give people a sense of who's here and where we are. So obviously you can see the Parliament buildings over my shoulder here. But if you look down as well, you can see we have a number of members of the Canadian Forces who are in amongst the crowd taking part. We're going to walk this way. I just want to give you a sense of how many people are here. As you look just this way as I'm pointing, that's where you'll see the parade. You can see the memorial off in the distance past the tree. You're looking at people who it has to be, let's call it 10 people deep at this point. And this works all the way around, far down the block this side, back up the next side on the other side of the memorial. So that gives you a sense of how many people are here. And many people I've talked to say that they had come in the past, but haven't for the past few years. This year, it feels different, and they wanted to be here to show some sense of respect, of remembrance, not forgetting, and for understanding that we're not always talking about the distant past, but very much present day for people in Ottawa. And lots of kids here. We talked to a few of them just a few minutes ago, but we've seen lots of families bringing their children as well, some of them very small. They'll never remember being here. And I asked one father, your daughter looks to be about 2. She obviously doesn't understand and she won't remember. And he said, but I'll remember that I brought her, and that's what's important.
Well, it's a great story that's unfolding immediately around you, Diana, and we're lucky to have you there to tell it to us. And as we've witnessed in past years, and as you're witnessing today, that range of ages. There was a time when Remembrance Day in this city was basically just for veterans, in the sense of that's who kind of turned up. Not many others, veterans and their immediate families. This is much bigger, much bigger. As we've noted for a number of reasons today, perhaps most emotionally because of what happened here 3 weeks ago. But if the crowd size estimates are anything like we are being told, that it could reach up into the 60 to 80,000, it will be quite something to see. Let's listen to a little bit of this parade movement on the grounds of the National War Memorial now, because it's always a special moment. Just getting people into position. for the arrival ceremonies that will take place. And you heard one of the MCs preparing the crowd for the various dignitaries who will be arriving. There's a fairly long list of people, but the main players in this ceremony, of course, are the veterans. They're here already. The dignitaries will be the Prime Minister, the Governor General, their spouses, and Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, whose husband, Commander Timothy Lawrence, the Royal Navy, will be here as well. Brian.
We should mention for the military units, it's quite an awkward area to march in because it's sort of a large triangle with lots of sort of jagged edges. That's one of the reasons it's actually quite hard to judge the crowd because they're sort of scattered in different areas. Though this is certainly, I think, going to be tens of thousands. But quite an awkward area to get all the forces together.
Let's go back down to Evan Solomon. We got Evan on the line there.
Peter, of the many dignitaries that are here, the many people who have served heroically, there is one very special guest here. He's literally sitting right behind me in that group of people, Brendan Stevenson. He was standing sentry over the unknown soldier right beside Corporal Cirillo when Corporal Cirillo was gunned down, a lifelong friend of Corporal Cirillo. He will not talk publicly about it. He's sitting with another member of the Argyll and Sutherlands, Corporal Button. He said this is just an extraordinary moment for him to be back here. He's been back since, but to be back here on a day like this, for him, as for everyone, it's an especially poignant day. But just imagine what's going through his mind now as he thinks about his lifelong friend. He thinks about what it was like to be here on that day. And through that story and his story, Corporal Cirillo's, people are going back in time toward those vets of World War I. So many, many different levels going on today, Peter.
All right, Evan, thank you. And we'll see Brandon Stevenson a little later. But as Evan said, this is a private moment for him at a very public ceremony. It must be difficult, obviously, on a lot of different levels. He was very close, as Evan said, to Nathan Cirillo. One of the first arrivals, as we hear the preparations taking place, will be the Silver Cross Mother. Now, the Silver Cross Mother is the person who is picked by the nation each year to represent, well, technically mothers who have lost sons or daughters in a conflict serving Canada. But in many ways, the Silver Cross Mother represents all families who have had that happen to them, where they have lost a member of their family due to service for Canada in a conflict. This year's Silver Cross Mother is Gisèle Michaud of Edmundston, New Brunswick. Charles-Philippe Michaud of the Royal 22nd Regiment, the Van Duys, was mortally wounded when he stepped on an IED, one of those explosive devices, while he was on patrol in southwest Kandahar in Panjwai district in June of 2009. He was flown home to be in a hospital in Quebec City and close to home, but he died shortly after that in July of 2009. Her story, Gisèle Michaud's story, the Silver Cross Mother, is what we want you to see right now.
I go to see Charles at the cemetery every day. Every day. It's not far from our house. So I go every day and I talk to him, and he's giving me some strength to go on. You gotta go on, Mom. I knew that Charles wanted to be in the soldiers at an early age. He dressed up like a soldier, even when he was very young. And as he grew older, we knew that he wanted to wear the uniform and he wanted to serve his country. He wanted to be a soldier. I have many things around the house because it keeps his memory alive. He played saxophone and I had to drop everything that I did, chores in the house, and I had to go downstairs and play the piano with him. because he wanted to know better the notes for the saxophone. So he played piano a little bit too. But the guitar was his most, he spent many hours on the guitar. Every time he went on a mission, we were so worried and we were so stressed. He knew there was a danger the last one that he went because it was in Pinjoi district. And he said, it's really dangerous this time. We are walking hand in hand with the Taliban. So it's going to be very dangerous. But I'll be back. Don't worry. Don't worry, I'll be back.
Word is reaching here to the Kandahar airfield, the military base in southern Afghanistan, of the death of Master-Corporal Charles-Philippe Michaud. He is the 122nd Canadian soldier to die. He was on foot patrol on June 23rd when an improvised explosive device went off, mortally wounding him.
He stayed alive to come home and to die with us, with his family. The battalion every year, on his anniversary of his passing, every year when the guys come, it's like they bring Charles home because they talk about Charles. They talk about Chuck, what he did, and the fun they had with him. I'm going to be honored to have the opening of the armory in Edmundston by the name of Charles. Master-Corporal Charles Chuck Michaud. And I think he would be proud. So I'm very honored that the armory was named by his name. When I found out that I was chosen to be the Silver Cross Mother, it was in May of this year. I was really surprised. I was overwhelmed, and I was very honored that I've been chosen. When I go on the 11th of November, I'm going to think about the poor family that lost a son. On the end of October, I've been there and I know how they feel, and it's a terrible tragedy to lose a child, a son. So I'm going to be thinking of that poor family over there, and the one in Saint-Jean-sur-Richelieu too.
The Silver Cross Mother, Gisèle Michaud, Edmundston, New Brunswick. She will be here in the next few minutes, and of course, she will be laying a wreath on behalf of all those who've lost family members in the service of their country. As we mentioned, as Diana mentioned, a very mixed crowd today of ages, backgrounds, and of service. Various groups, once again, positioning themselves for what will take place here in the next little while. And those who receive on this day, of course, the most attention are the veterans themselves. And Hannah Thibodeau is standing by with a very special one. Hannah.
Absolutely, all the veterans very special here. I found this gentleman, Don Carrington, and you may recognize the hat. It's from the Argyll and Southern Highlanders, the regiment Corporal Cirillo belonged to. So you were telling me earlier that this Remembrance Day has special significance to it.
It certainly has. The passing and the tragic shooting of Corporal Cirillo brought to heart the circumstances where we're facing an increasing threat, and it brought to mind too the number of friends that I've lost over the years, and the service that my own family has put in the Army, and just couldn't stay away today.
Don Carrington, I want to thank you for your time today and for coming down and paying tribute to your friends.
Thank you very much.
the Right Honourable Stephen Harper, Prime Minister of Canada, and Mrs. Harper are now arriving.
All right, thank you, Hannah. And as you hear, the Prime Minister, Mrs. Harper, due to arrive. They've had quite the schedule in the last few days. They were in China yesterday, and for the meetings that the Prime Minister was taking part in, wanted to be back here for Remembrance Day this year. Originally, he had planned not to be here, but the events of the last couple of weeks changed that. So the Prime Minister flew back, got in during the middle of the night, and both Prime Minister Harper and Mrs. Harper will be in attendance here today. Meeting and welcomed by various members of the Canadian Legion.
This is the nicest Remembrance Day, I think, in the whole time I've been in.
And in the official lineup, Noel Kinsella, the Speaker of the Senate, Julian Vantino, the Minister of Veterans Affairs. We saw the Chief of the Defence Staff talking to Hannah just a few moments ago. You heard Mrs. Harper talking about the weather today, and I think everybody would agree to that it's one of the nicest days we've witnessed in many years. Mrs. Harper saying it's the best weather she's seen during her time attending these ceremonies. We're 15 minutes away from the 11 o'clock moment when this crowd of thousands will fall silent to remember.
Mrs. Gisèle Michaud of Edmonton, New Brunswick is the mother of late Master-Corporal Charles-Philippe Michaud, who was mortally wounded after stepping on an improvised explosive device while on patrol in the Panjawi district, southwest Kandahar city, Afghanistan. He passed away on July 4, 2009. He was a member of the 2nd Battalion of the Royal 22e Régiment, based out of Albuquerque, Québec. Mesdames et messieurs, la mère décorée de la Croix d'Argent arrive maintenant. Madame Gisèle Michaud, d'Edmonton, au Nouveau-Brunswick. Elle est la mère de feu du caporal-chef Charles-Philippe Michaud. Ce dernier a été mortellement blessé après avoir marché sur un engin explosif improvisé lors de patrouille dans le district de Manin Gate, au sud-ouest de la ville de Highness, en Afghanistan. Il est décédé le 4 juillet de la même année. Il était membre du 2e bataillon du Royal 22e Régiment à Valcartier, Québec.
Well, the crowd reacting to the arrival of the Silver Cross Mother in a way they haven't reacted to any of the other arrivals of dignitaries today, with sustained applause for Gisèle Michaud. Her son, as you witnessed in that wonderful video essay of her story, her son, the Master-Corporal Charles Chuck, his buddies called him, Philippe Michaud, who died on July 4th, 2009. He died in an area that took a lot of Canadian lives in Afghanistan, just west of Kandahar, southwest, I guess, the Panjwai district. There were battles in that area, but there were also a lot of situations like the one that cost Master-Corporal Michaud's life, and that was the whole sense of IEDs, explosive devices that either went off as troops. In this case, Master-Corporal Michaud was on foot patrol, others that blew up vehicles. A lot of the Canadians who died in Afghanistan died as a result of those IEDs, not in gunfights, not in battles, in confrontation with the Taliban, but through IEDs. Brian, you know, both you and I were in Afghanistan at different times, and it was painful watching how those patrols would go to as much trouble as they could to ensure that they didn't get trapped by IEDs, but it's almost impossible.
Yeah, almost impossible. A real ambush alleyway too, extremely difficult to motor through, always very tense. Everybody who served there would know the nervousness.
The Right Honourable David Johnston, Governor General of Canada, and Mrs. Sharon Johnston.
The Governor General arriving now. We're told he will be in his Army uniform, the commander of all Canadian forces, and therefore has the right to wear any uniform he wishes. I can remember the day he was sworn in, he told me he wasn't sure if he'd ever wear a uniform because he'd never been in the military and he wasn't sure whether it was appropriate. Well, he got over those concerns and he seems very comfortable wearing the uniforms today.
Welcome home.
David Johnston, the Governor General, his wife Sharon, being received by the Prime Minister and his wife.
Yeah.
And we're both the Prime Minister and the Governor General. Let's see whether we can hear what's going on there.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal.
They're in position now to welcome the daughter of the Queen, Princess Royal, Princess Anne, who's been in Canada since yesterday. Her husband, Timothy Lawrence, is with the Royal Navy. She's here today to be part of the rededication ceremony for the National War Memorial. This had been planned long ago. This wasn't suddenly planned the last couple of weeks. It's always been the plan. Her grandmother and grandfather were here for the dedication in 1939, and today Princess Anne is here for the rededication. So now the official party will get in position for the ceremony that will take place as we approach the 11 o'clock hour here in the nation's capital. And if you've ever watched this day before, or if you've taken part in it, either here in Ottawa or in your communities across the land, you will know what is about to unfold. Royal salute. Governor General takes it with Princess Anne at his side. If you're hearing some strange noises in the background here, they are clearly having some problems with the public address system. At times it almost sounds like a string of kind of low-level firecrackers going off. It's the speaker system that they're using for the various announcements that are being made, and they've been having this problem for the last 90 minutes, so clearly somebody must be working furiously to try to figure it out, because it's not helpful to anybody in the crowd.
Seems louder than usual, too.
It does, yeah. They're having issues there. Princess Anne talking with the Speaker of the Senate, Noel Kinsella, Chief of Defense Staff, the Silver Cross Mother, Gisèle Michaud. Let me just tell you one other thing about the Silver Cross Mother. You could see in our little tribute to her, video tribute to her, this pretty remarkable woman. Each year she hosts the friends and colleagues of her son on Remembrance Day in New Brunswick. She asks them to come to the house, and they all gather to remember him and to see each other in a way of reuniting on that day through his life and remembering his life as well. So as we said, part of what will be a special section of the service today, which is the rededication ceremony, and they will unveil the new words on the monument and the new dates representing the time that Canadians fought in Afghanistan and the time that Canadians fought in the Boer War at the end of the 19th century. And some words on the front of the memorial that have just been added overnight in the service of Canada. This rededication ceremony is, of course, a rededication because the original dedication was in 1939. I got a picture of that day here in Ottawa. There it is, King George VI in the center of your picture, and his wife, who is known to us affectionately as the Queen Mother, because of course she was Queen Elizabeth's mother. They were here. The crowd was huge. Said to have been 100,000 people here, the biggest crowd ever for a Remembrance Day service in Ottawa, by far. Today may be the second largest.
Because it was very moving then, but it was seen immediately as a spectacular statue as well, spectacular monument.
That was the summer of 1939 that happened, and the world was tipping towards the Second World War.
It was more than tipping, it was really crashing towards it.
Everybody knew, suspected that this couldn't go anywhere else but another war.
And those were the years of dread. It just kept coming closer and closer, and then it was there.
Now, as we do each year, as we get to the moment of remembrance and what follows in playing of the last post,
ladies and gentlemen,
wreath laying,
please join the Central Band of the Canadian Armed Forces
we will
and
remain
the Ottawa
quiet
Children's Choir in the singing of O Canada.
and allow you to feel like you are here, exactly here at this moment on this day. And as you can hear the MC in the background, this service now is about to begin.
They shall grow not old, as we the left grow old. Age shall not worry them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember.
Ils ne vieilliront pas comme nous.
They shall not grow old, as we that are left grow old.
Ils ne connaîtront jamais le
Age shall not weary them,
poids des années.
nor the years condemn.
Quand viendra
At the going down of the sun and in the morning,
nous souviendrons
we will remember them.
Takskisia smagan sihkanak, ne mui takihtayoak. Piwan gienoga takihtayoya. Ne mi tasipigihkagwak, mina tanawaliskisuak. Kihtayowin ne mui tapakakamskagwak. Kat tapaksemo, mina gat sipayage. Tahkigakskisino, tahkigakskisino.
The National War Memorial, unveiled in 1939 to commemorate the response of Canadians in the First World War, symbolizes the sacrifice of all Canadians who have served Canada in time of war in the cause of peace and freedom. Today, the memorial will be rededicated to honor all who have fallen in the service of Canada.
The National War Memorial, unveiled in 1939 to commemorate the response of Canadians to the First World War, symbolizes the sacrifice made by all Canadians who served Canada in times of war in the cause of peace and freedom. Today, the monument will be rededicated in honor of all those who fell in the service of Canada.
In 1925, Vernon March won the Canadian government competition for design for the National War Memorial. He was one of 7 brothers from the Yorkshire, England, who, along with their sister, spent 10 years working to complete the labor of love. En 1925, Vernon March a remporté le concours du gouvernement canadien pour un design
the Canadian competition for the design of the Canadian War Memorial. He was one of 7 brothers in Yorkshire, England, who spent more than 10 years working to complete this labor of love.
Seen marching through the arch are 22 figures representing all branches of the service during the First World War. And upon the faces of these figures, the eager expression of hope replaces the lines of strife and death. They leave behind an unlimbered cannon and all that symbolizes.
We see 22 figures representing all branches of the services, and on their faces we see the eager energy and hope replacing the lines of strife and death. They leave behind them an unlimbered cannon with all that represents.
The was unveiled by His Majesty King George VI, May 1939, before a crowd of 100,000 spectators. He called it the spontaneous response of the nation's conscience. And since that time, the annual Remembrance Day Ceremony has been held at this memorial.
The National War Memorial was unveiled by His Majesty George VI in May of 1939 in front of a crowd of 100,000 spectators. At that time, he called it the spontaneous response of the nation's conscience. And since then, the annual ceremony has always been held at this monument.
In May of 1982, the National War Memorial was rededicated to the memory of those who served in the Second World War, as well as Korea, in addition to those of the First World War. The Honourable Edward Schreier, former Governor-General, unveiled the dates 1939-45 and 1950-53, which we see affixed in bronze on the west and east sides of the War Memorial. These dates join the existing inscription of 1914 to 1918 on the south and north facades. In
May of 1982, the National War Memorial was rededicated in memory of all those who served in World War II and the Korean War. The Honourable Edward Schweier, former Governor General, unveiled the dates of 1939 to 1945 and 1950 to 1953 on the east and west facades of the monument. Those dates were added to the 1914 to 1918 inscription on the south and north facades.
Of an unidentified Canadian soldier who died in the First World War was repatriated from France and was buried in this special tomb in front of the National War Memorial. In
May of 2000, the remains of an unknown soldier who died in World War I was repatriated from France and buried in a special tomb in front of the National War Memorial.
The tomb of the unknown soldier was created specifically to honor the more than 117,000 Canadians who have sacrificed their lives in the cause of peace and freedom. Furthermore, the unknown soldier represents all Canadians, whether they be Navy, Army, Air Force, or Merchant Marine, who gave their lives for Canada in all conflicts, past, present, and future. The
tomb of the unknown soldier was created to honor the 117,000 Canadians who sacrificed their life for the cause of freedom. This tomb represents all Canadians, whether Navy, Army, Air Force, or Merchant Marine, all those who gave their lives in all conflicts, past, present, and future.
As we gather here for the November 11th Remembrance Day Ceremony, we will once again rededicate the National War Memorial.
Today, as we gather here for the National Remembrance Day Ceremony, we will once again be rededicating the National War Memorial.
Governor General of Canada, His Excellency, the Right Honourable David Johnston, to offer remarks and rededicate Canada's National War Memorial.
I'd now like to invite the Governor-General of Canada, His Excellency David Johnston, to say a few words and rededicate the National War Memorial of Canada.
At the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month, when the guns of the Great War at last fell silent, the fury of conflict was replaced by a deafening silence. During
the fragile breaks between the plaintive cries of the dying, we were confronted with the extent of our actions, of our losses, and our sacrifices.
Between the sounds of dying and the cries of relief, we were faced with all we had done, all we had lost, all we had sacrificed. In that silence, we met a truth so obvious and so terrifying, we swore we would never take up arms again. One owes respect to the living, said Voltaire. To the dead, one owes only the truth. We vowed never to forget. Fire! We built monuments, massive pillars of stone and metal, and placed them at the very heart of our towns and cities so they might stop us daily in our tracks. We
noted the names and recorded them in books and engraved them on walls in the hope that we would forever protect them against anonymity, all those who we were unable to save.
Wrote those names in books and carved them into walls in a constant effort to save those who we failed from the faithlessness of anonymity. And we pledged to gather in our communities each year at this hour on this singular day of remembrance so that we might fall silent again and again and again. Today we stand as one in silent tribute, not only to keep the vow made long ago, but also to rededicate this symbol of that promise. When King George VI unveiled our National War Memorial, he called it the spontaneous response of the nation's conscience, revealing the very soul of the nation. Levez les yeux.
Look up and look at the bronze figures that represent freedom. Those figures cannot be separated because freedom means that we must be together. We want nothing to do with slavery.
Look upward now and against the sky, see the bronze figures of peace and freedom. Their arms are linked. They cannot be separated because freedom without peace is agony, and peace without freedom is slavery. And we will tolerate neither. This is the truth we owe our dead. And now we look down to the resting place of a Canadian boy who died at Vimy Ridge. We don't know his name. He is our unknown soldier. In anonymity, he honors all Canadians who died and may yet die for their country. We will stand guard for him and for them, as did Nathan Cirillo and Patrice Vincent, who take their place among them. We
will guard for him and for all others, as did Nathan Cirillo and Patrice Vincent, who have now joined them. As Governor-General of Canada and Commander-in-Chief, it is my solemn privilege to be here today beside all of you, a few steps from Parliament, where we resolve our difficulties through dialogue and the rule of law.
People of peace, of respect and tolerance, kindness and honor. These qualities are alive in our national conscience precisely because we hold them as precious.
We are people of peace, of respect, of tolerance, of goodness, and of honor. These qualities are part of our national conscience because they are so precious, and they are accessible to us because of all those whom we are honoring today, because they were prepared to die to preserve those values.
We will keep those men and women in our memory. Without memory, said Rabbi Dal Marmur, there can be neither continuity nor identity. We've had somber occasion in past weeks to ponder our identity as the very symbols of our peace and freedom were violated.
But we are here today, and here we will stay, unshakable in our conviction, remembering all of those who sacrificed so much for us. As we rededicate this monument, we pledge once again to preserve peace and freedom, the soul of our nation.
And here we shall remain, unshaken in resolve, grateful in remembrance of those who have sacrificed, rededicated like this memorial to our eternal duty, peace and freedom, the very soul of our nation. Lest we forget, n'oublions jamais.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Merci, Votre Excellence. I now invite Her Royal Highness, the Princess Royal, Princess Anne, to offer some remarks. J'invite maintenant Son Altesse Royale, la Princesse Royale, Princesse Anne, à nous offrir quelques remarques.
With my humble duty, it is my honour to read a message from Her Majesty the Queen. 75 years ago, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth dedicated this National War Memorial in honour of all those who paid the supreme sacrifice in the Great War. Today it is fitting that, with this ceremony of rededication, we pay tribute to all those Canadians who in the intervening years have laid down their lives in the service of peace, justice and freedom. Un message de Sa Majesté la Reine.
A message from Her Majesty the Queen.
Il y a 75 ans,
75 years ago, King George VI and Queen Elizabeth were here to dedicate the National War Memorial to all those who made the ultimate sacrifice during the Great War. Today, we want to take this advantage of this new rededication to pay tribute to all those Canadians who sacrificed their lives in the service of peace, justice, and freedom.
Signed, Elizabeth R.
Thank you, Your Royal Highness. Merci, Votre Altesse Royale.
We are gathered together today to thank all those men and women who served our country with dedication and courage. Their service has given us freedom and the hope of a better world.
In the spirit of that freedom and hope, I invite you, according to your tradition and conscience, to pray to God for blessing and guidance, or simply to use this moment for personal reflection as others pray. Let us pray. Faithful and gracious God, we gather today with our emotions still raw from the shocking attacks so recently witnessed in Saint-Jean and in our nation's capital, from the violence that transformed this national memorial to military sacrifice into a place of military sacrifice, a place where an unknown soldier and a soldier now known to us all lay side by side in death, having accepted to bravely stand on guard for our nation and for its values, rights, and freedoms. We remember them, O God, and we remember the thousands of others who have similarly stood and served and sacrificed, from Lundy's Lane to Paardeberg, from Vimy Ridge to Juno Beach, from the Battle of Britain to victory in the Atlantic, from Capian to Croatia to Pinjouet.
We remember all those who, in the name of justice and peace, made the ultimate sacrifice of their lives. May they rest in peace, and may the memory of their sacrifice and the sacrifice of all those who continue to serve inspire us to do our share so that our world can truly achieve peace.
We pray for all who are bereaved and for all who continue to suffer the consequences of war and of oppression, violence, and terror. We confess with sadness, O God, that ours is a world where want and warfare still flourish, where disparities between those who have much and those who have little still abound, where ideologies of hate and exclusion spread barbarism and fear. We beg your forgiveness, O God, and we ask that our hearts be made anew. As we have witnessed the rededication of our National War Memorial this morning, may we too be rededicated. Give us courage, O God, to stand with those who are victims of tyranny and aggression, to stand against those who would trample a people's rights and freedoms, and to stand amongst those of every faith and nation who would strive to restore and defend peace and justice in the world. Dieu de grâce, entende nos prières.
God of grace, please hear our prayers for all those who lead this country. We pray to you for Her Majesty the Queen and His Excellency the Governor-General. We pray to you for the Prime Minister and the Minister of National Defense and the Minister of Veterans Affairs. May all these individuals, as well as all other leaders in this country, meet the needs of our citizens with integrity and grace.
For our Chief of the Defence Staff, and for all members of our Canadian Armed Forces who serve and defend our country both at home and abroad. Uphold them, we pray, and grant them your strength and protection.
We also pray to you for their families and their loved ones, whose support is so important. Stay with them, support them with your compassion and your goodness.
We give thanks especially today for all of our veterans and their families whose service and sacrifice have won our freedom and defended our nation's values. And
we particularly recommend to you, dear Lord, all those who were wounded in their body or their soul as they served our country. We pray to you so that they may heal and renew their hope. And we offer them our respect and ongoing dedication.
In ages past, our hope for years to come. Bless this good and beautiful land of Canada and grant us the will to work together for that better day when war and the need for war might be perished from the earth and all peoples of every nation might learn to live together in peace. We ask this in your holy name. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the Vice-Regal Party will now begin placing their wreaths, and you may be seated. Mesdames et messieurs, veuillez vous asseoir. Nous allons procéder maintenant avec les membres du groupe vice-royal qui déposeront maintenant leur couronne.
Nous sommes ici pour nos souvenirs et témoigner.
We are here to remember.
Everything has changed, yet nothing has changed. How can that be? Nothing has changed who we are, but everything has changed in maintaining who we are. We have always been a peace-loving nation. That has not changed. What has changed is that loving peace must be coupled with actively embracing and ensuring peace and harmony. We are now all guardians of that peace. We cannot take our Canadian reality for granted. We are forever charged to actively pursue and affirm our Canadian reality, inspired as ever by our heroic troops who fought to defend the freedoms we so cherish and are now doing so right in the eye of the terror storm. Our sacred space, this sacred space where we gather, has been violated, yet it remains a sacred space, perhaps even more so. What was till now a vivid symbol of the precious blood spilled to preserve our freedoms is now and forever a place where real blood was spilled. We are shaken to the core, but shaken toward firm resolve. If anything, we are shaken from apathy toward actively promoting our sacred values. We realize that our soldiers put their lives on the line for us, not just overseas, but right here in Canada. We therefore remember them and their families even more fervently. But remembrance without appreciation is never sufficient. Our remembrance of our Canadian soldiers, heroes all, must escalate into remembrance coupled with ongoing gratitude, actively expressed perpetually and wholeheartedly. We are united, not because of a common enemy. We are united because of a common and shared resolve that Canada remain defined by its warmth, its kindness, its harmony, its culture of embrace. That is what our veterans fought for in past wars overseas. That is what we must now all fight for right here at home, with determination, with courage, with reverence for our soldiers and our life-saving first responders, with unremitting commitment and with full embrace of the values that make Canada great. To our troops, the guardians of our Canadian family, let them hear with resounding passion what was clear in the past few weeks, that we venerate them, that we appreciate them, that indeed we love them. Let them hear it and let them feel it. Together, we love our troops. Let us all ring out and say, we love our troops. God bless our veterans. God bless our troops. God bless Canada. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, God save the Queen. Mesdames et messieurs, Dieu protège la reine.
Well, for the past 50 minutes, 50 minutes, we've allowed this ceremony to take place in your homes exactly as it played out here without interruption from us. We're in a pause now between what happened immediately around the National War Memorial and the parade that will take place.
Ladies and gentlemen, the March Past will soon commence.
The March Past, as the MC is saying there now.
Royal Military College of Canada, members of the Royal Canadian Navy, the Canadian Army, and the Royal Canadian Air Force.
So that gives you an idea of the lineup of what will happen in the parade, but often I got to say it kind of juggles around. It is kind of makes itself up as it goes along the parade each year. But this does give us an opportunity as the various dignitaries now chat amongst themselves and get ready to position themselves for the parade to talk about what we witnessed in that 50 minutes. There's been much discussion in the days leading up to this that we would see something very different this year, not just with the attendance of people like Princess Anne, the Princess Royal, who's talking to veterans now, the Governor General and the Prime Minister. Let's see if we can hear this.
We would also ask that those wishing to place a wreath at the National War Memorial or a copy on the tomb of the unknown soldier, please wait until an announcement is made to that effect, and that we will open the site.
A little hard to pick it up, the details with the PA system going in the background, but we knew it would be different with the attendance of a royal, so to speak, along with the Governor General and the Prime Minister. But the size of the crowd is enormous. I mean, it's certainly, without question, the largest I've seen in attendance here at Remembrance Day in all the years I've been covering this moment, this day. Probably, we don't know yet. We should know in the next little while. I think Evan Solomon's tracking that for us, and will get it to us in the next little bit. But it's probably well into the tens of thousands, for sure, and maybe the biggest crowd since the dedication ceremony in 1939, when there were said to be 100,000 people here in Ottawa. It was hard to find anywhere where you can't see some crowd today in attendance on the lawns surrounding Parliament Hill, looking down on the War Memorial, down Elgin Street, up Wellington Street. I mean, it's quite something. But also, and you're hearing a smattering of it now, the applause that has happened throughout the ceremony since the arrival of the Silver Cross Mother, and then at various moments during the service. That's kind of unprecedented. There have been smatterings of applause in past years, but nothing like this, and it seemed to be spontaneous. They weren't calling for applause, it just kind of happened. And that, this part kind of happens usually each year when they clap for the vets as they position themselves for the parade. But through the service, it was quite something. And Brian, I want to get your comments on that in a moment, but let's go down to check out what Diana Swain has for us now. Diana.
Thanks, Peter. You know, it's interesting. There's certainly appreciation for the veterans, but there are many people in the crowd today among these thousands who are currently serving. I have to say that's the one thing I'm not sure I anticipated seeing. You think of the crowds being built up of people who are not in the military, here to show their respect and their support. But many people who are currently serving are here. I have to show you, first of all, that on this hill, people are everywhere. People have been using screens to see. They have climbed on the hill. This is all in behind the actual memorial, and the crowd wraps around. As you see behind me going down Wellington, the crowd goes as far as the eye can see. And just quickly, as we see, the parade is going to be starting very shortly. The crowd now, as I said, 10 deep sometime earlier, probably 15 or 20 in some spots, Peter.
All right, Diana, thank you. It is around us at our location, it's 15 deep anyway. I mean, it's quite incredible to see. Brian?
Peter, there's somewhere in every single spot where a person can go. I think you'll be hanging off ledges. there anymore. There is something in the air today, there's no question. Looking at that ceremony with that brilliant day behind us, it looked like an historic picture of a great event. And I think this day is going to be remembered for a very long time. And it's here. It's been building across the country, I think, for quite a while this year. It's not only here. The Queen, on Sundays, laid the wreath at the Cenotaph in London, and the crowd broke into an applause they never had before. It might have something to do with societies feeling somewhat under threat these days, wanting to show that how firm they stand. Here in Ottawa, certainly, this has been a moment of a nation coming together in the most extraordinary sense of solidity and strong feeling. As you say, not like the ones we've seen in the past. The applause I haven't seen Canadian veterans like this applauded quite so large, except for Appledorn in Holland, when the Canadians go back to celebrate their liberation there. This has been wonderful. But there just is a feeling in the air that we're watching something that people will remember that year in 2014. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
Remembrance Day.
It's the parade starting now. We're going to sort of dip in and out of the parade in terms of trying to catch some of the color of this. The various groups, regiments, organizations as they march past. Let's catch a bit of this moment. We wait for the parade to actually start. They're just continuing to put themselves in the right position. But it's interesting when you talk about what we've witnessed today and the possibility of kind of the historical nature of it, and we'll be looking at pictures of this for years to come, and I'm sure you're right about that. It's interesting that the backdrop for some people is this debate about whether it should be a full national holiday, Remembrance Day. It is in parts of the country, not in all parts.
Good to see you.
What do you think of that?
Well, I was very struck by something that one of our producers, Laura, said last night, that her mom, who was a teacher, pointed out that if you make it a holiday for the whole country, that means the children of Canada will not get Remembrance Day in their schools. And I remember that as a kid. You remember that as a kid. There's one of the most profound coming to face with Canada's history that a child can have is in the Remembrance Day ceremony in schools, and also in workplaces. A lot of workplaces will turn their televisions on and will pause around the time of the 11th. Make it a holiday, I don't know. It seems to me we're brought together more as a nation when our children are in school and we're in work and people pause. If they can make it to a ceremony like this anywhere in Canada, they will. But something about making it a holiday where people can go wherever they want diffuses it, I think, spreads it out too much.
It's interesting, watching the debate on social media, because there's been a pretty active debate on this issue. Seemingly by people who are totally into Remembrance Day. They see it as an emotional and a very important day, and yet they're divided on that issue about whether or not it should be a national day of remembrance, a national holiday. Well, here come the pipes and drums, and boy, you don't want to get in the way of those, so let's listen to this. Brandon Stevenson of the Argyll and Sutherland, who was standing sentry next to his good friend Nathan Cirillo on October 22nd when the gunman attacked and shot and killed Nathan Cirillo. Extremely emotional day, we're sure, for Brandon Stevenson. But this uninterrupted applause for the veterans as they parade around the National War Memorial. So that was Brandon Stevenson again, giving his salute at the Tomb of the Unknown. You know, it's not just that it's a bigger crowd here to witness this. There seem to me to be a lot more veterans than I've seen in past years as well. So we met some in the lobby of the hotel last night. They'd be coming in from all over the country, wanting to be here, and some of them were telling me they hadn't been here before. So they just felt this year they needed to be here. All, you know, for different reasons. Some because of the anniversaries, some because of the shootings that took place. The parade continues, and involving all different services, regiments. And there you see the Mounties here as well. The various police forces that work in the Ottawa area, they're all a part of this today. Let's go down to the crowd again. Hannah Thibodeau has one of the veterans who is here today. Hannah.
So I'm joined by a veteran, Ted Patrick. He's 94 years young, right, Ted?
Yeah.
Now, what was the moment, you were telling me there was a moment that really touched you today. What was that?
During the lament, it just started to bring tears to my eyes, because that's really very deeply involved in the emotions of what we've all gone through. And the survivors that I remember, and the guys that didn't come back. I had a lot of buddies there in the regiment. We crossed the Rubicon River, and our company was wiped out. And I was one of only 4 survivors but the rest were all captured because there was a number of German tanks and infantry there, and the captain, when he discovered that, he did, rather than have a massacre, he surrendered, which was a good thing.
Now, tell the viewers all of the different locations you served.
Yeah. What about?
Where did you serve?
Well, I can't remember names. That's my trouble.
Countries.
Well, Italy, naturally, because that's where we did most of our fighting. But Holland was exceptional. It was a different kind of fighting. And those Dutch people, my God, they're wonderful people. To a Canadian, they'll let you buy a coffee, but they won't let you buy a beer.
And that must be a good thing, huh?
Oh, I've made lots of friends. I've been there. Eileen and I were there 6 times.
Now, you met all of the dignitaries today, too, and they remembered you.
Oh, they did remember me, and that's unusual, you know. My face isn't one of those startling ones that brings memory up.
I think, Ted, your face is definitely one of those that you remember. And Peter, this is the reason why many people come down here, is to hear the stories like Ted has to offer. And it's just a pleasure for us to share those with you.
Thanks, Hannah. Pretty special. Well, what's he telling us now?
And cousins, they're all in the forces. Every damn one of them. Dad served in the First War, served in the Second War. He only lasted until he was 59. Then he died from complications. And of course, I had my service there. I wanted to join the Air Force because I wanted to fly, but I was colorblind. So I joined the Corps Signals.
Ted, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, wind it up.
Oh, he says wind it up. He's done. He's going for dinner at the Chateau Laurier.
He should be he should be a TV director. He's pretty well directing the show here. That was pretty good. Thanks, Hannah. The Mounties on the march past now. Let's go back into the crowd. Diana Swain is with us. Diana.
Peter, I'm with Carlene Smith. She lives in Ottawa and was just telling me this is the first time she's come to this service. And so I'm wondering why this year?
So I just think that with the recent events, it's definitely brought more awareness of how lucky we are to be in Canada and to be protected by soldiers past, present, and future. And I think it's important that we show our appreciation for what we have.
You were clapping pretty vigorously when I came and tapped you on the shoulder. What has this experience been like for you emotionally to be here?
It's been very emotional. I didn't actually realize how emotional I was going to get, just even watching the veterans come up the first time, and just really getting a sense of perspective of what people have given up for us to be in a situation that we're in right now. So.
There's talk of making this a national holiday. That, you know, on one hand that would show respect for it, but on the other hand, a fear that people would treat it like any other day off and wouldn't take the time to stop and remember. What's your thought on that?
I think it'd be a great idea if we could use this opportunity as a nation to celebrate our troops. It is difficult because you hope that people would appreciate it for what it is and put the effort into coming up to appreciate the troops and to appreciate what we have. It's really hard to say. I think that if it was a holiday, more people would definitely come out and participate.
Well, I think you've been one of the largest crowds that we've seen here in many, many years. So thanks for taking time out to talk to us.
Thank you very much.
Peter?
All right, Diana, thank you. The crowd not only watching the march past now, but they're all also waiting for their moment, because they have a moment in this day and in this story as well. And that moment takes place at the Tomb of the Unknown, when the crowds are allowed to move up to this spot where you saw many of the dignitaries walking past, placing their wreaths at the main monument. But what happens now, if you follow protocol exactly, once you pass 11 o'clock, the poppies come off. The poppy period is over. But what has become custom here in Ottawa is that the poppies are taken off people's lapels and they're brought here to the Tomb of the Unknown, and it will be covered by poppies within a very short period of time. As soon as they lift those security barriers and say it's okay, you can go ahead now, the crowds will surge up towards the Tomb of the Unknown. And remember, it really is an unknown Canadian soldier there, unidentified. For the battles of World War I, around the Vimy area was where this body was returned from. And at the Tomb of the Unknown, the poppies will cover that whole stone area. You see some of the dignitaries now, those who were invited within the security areas, are placing their poppies. So that'll be something to see, and we'll want to see some of that before we sign off in another 20 minutes or so. You know, when you recognize what this day is, and you hear us talk about it every once in a while, we talk about the 11th hour of the 11th day of the 11th month, that signifies our major moment of remembrance each day, or each year. You think back to the very first one, it was 96 years ago. The very first 11th hour of the 11th month of the 11th day. You know, one of my colleagues, Martin O'Brien, works at CBC in Toronto. He sent me an email in the last little while, and he had gone back and found his grandfather's diary. Lieutenant William J. O'Brien, the Canadian Field Artillery, Canadian Expeditionary Force. He'd kept a journal all the way from March 1915 to May 9th, 1919, when his service in Europe ended. And he found the diary entries for those particular days. And I'm going to just pull it up here if I can, and repeat to you what he found in terms of course, the moment I want it. Do you think I can find it? But the expectation that was growing around the 10th of November, which was a Sunday, and then the 11th of November, which was the Monday. On the 10th of November, the diary entry talks about that kind of expectation. Speculation is rife as to what Germany will do with our armistice terms tomorrow. The Allies had presented their terms of surrender that they wanted the Germans to sign, and so the speculation was rife. What would they do? Would they sign it? So on Monday, the 11th of November, 1918, 96 years ago today, he writes, "My clerk, Aitchison, brought me a wire ordering us to cease fire at 11 o'clock. Occasional bursts of frantic cheering can be heard in the street, and we have posted up notices in French for the edification of the civilians." The next day, Tuesday, the 12th of November, he writes this, "Went down to Valenciennes this afternoon with Cole of the 4th Battery. Was the guest of Captain Hap Rolfe tonight, and we went to the Valenciennes Theatre, where we enjoyed the 4th Division concert party." Can you imagine what that must have been felt like? They've just been through all these years of brutal, horrible war, seen so many of their friends die, butchered in the field. And then suddenly, within 24 hours, they're in a theater.
Concert party. And many of the diaries and letters of the veterans of that war recorded on the 11th itself. A sense of exhaustion was so severe. There was none of them found there was as much celebrating as you'd think, because they were just exhausted after years and years of this. But within days, they were out playing their baseball and going to concerts and dreaming of home, I'm sure.
You know, this is one of the great memorials, the National War Memorial that we have in this country. And every community, every city, every town has them. They were built after the First World War and then added to after the Second.
I was really struck by something that was said, that the King said in 1939, that he'd witnessed here with a crowd of 100,000 the spontaneous respect of the nation's conscience. The spontaneous response of a nation's conscience. I think we saw that today to an extraordinary event. This was a groundswell event. A lot of organization goes into it, but what really strikes you here is how many people made this into their day, came out in numbers not seen in our times, and have impressed upon this event their strong feeling of, again, spontaneous response to Canada's conscience at the time. A lot of the veterans associations were working all year on various anniversaries, and this wasn't a very big government-backed year for the anniversaries compared to past, but the volunteerism across this country that has come out this year has surprised just about everybody. People wanting to express a remembrance and a sense of awe at this historical past.
And I think what we saw immediately following the ceremony, and what we're about to witness now, is the dignitaries are gone. They're going to be opening up momentarily the security area so the public can get up there. What we saw, I think, it was deep respect for the service, as there always is, as it was happening. But the way they reacted to the veterans, when, it's nice to see the dignitaries there, it's nice to see a member of the royal family there and all that. But the heroes for them on this day were the veterans, and when they began their parade and that sustained applause that occurred.
And a support for their veterans that says in pretty clear terms, too, we want a lot more done for our veterans.
Yeah.
I think that speech has been here very much in the crowds today, that we're not entirely happy with.
And you see that echoing in the hallways of Parliament. Many veterans groups are not happy at all with the government and the treatment they've had from the Veterans Affairs Department, and they're making those arguments, and you hear them on days like this, and we've heard them in the last couple of days with veterans that we've talked to here, that this wasn't the place or the moment for that debate, but it's not like they're going to disappear from the stage when that debate does re-engage.
Theme that comes through in a lot of the letters of soldiers during the wars when they're over there. So the First World War particularly was, so many of them said, the people who have it hardest, worst, are the families at home. And this is a day not just to remember, of course, the soldiers who died, but those, so many Silver Cross mothers, so many families, parents, siblings who lost people they loved through those grim times. Each of these deaths, 112, 117,000, every one of them was a dead bayonet through somebody's heart, and in many cases, a great many hearts.
But still at the point of just letting the kind of select groups who are within the security wall go up and place their poppies at the Tomb of the Unknown. But the general public, they're waiting patiently for their moment, which should occur at any time now. Just letting the public in now. They're just opened up the lines. You see people starting to cross the street now, heading in that direction. They've let them in from the eastern side of the War Memorial now, and one assumes in a moment they'll let them in from the western and southern side. Now they've just let the southern side in, and this is where they'll start streaming in by the thousands.
Now they're coming in from the west as well.
Right.
A great many thousands will be here for that.
Evan Solomon, of course, from Power and Politics, has been watching this today as well, and he was very close. Evan, you were like literally on the doorstep there to the ceremony. Your thoughts as we watch these moments now with the public?
Well, this is always a special moment, as you say, Peter. People are streaming in. The other thing that you can see, Peter, from where I'm standing is just the connections that the veterans and the men and women who serve are making. They're here with their families, they're shaking hands, they're hugging each other as they come in. So outside of the service, there's a lot of personal moments that are taking place. The former CDS, General Hillier, General Walton Tinchuk, they're all here, Peter, and they're shaking hands. And you just see it in front of me now. The crowds are just pouring in toward the Tomb of the Unknown. They'll be laying their poppies, as you say, which is now the tradition. And it really is something to see the personal moments. And people who serve in the military, as you know well, Peter, are part of a family that the country gets to be part of on a day like November 11th. And there's really nothing like it to see it up close, Peter.
Yeah, it's special. A special opportunity to be there to see that, and this was, is part of this day that really is what the day is about, and that's about the public's opportunity to remember in a personal way and to feel close to what we witnessed by being at the Tomb of the Unknown and placing their poppies on it. Nobody here at this moment will not realize what happened literally within meters of this tomb, now almost 3 weeks ago, with Corporal Cirillo. And I found it really touching that one of the chaplain, the first chaplain who spoke, his remarks talked about how Nathan Cirillo had fallen and at this spot, and how suddenly in that moment he was lying next to that soldier from the First World War.
It was a very, very touching moment when he said that. And I think everybody had that image in their mind at that moment.
Look at that crowd.
For all the heavy security today, it wasn't obtrusive at all, really, was it?
No, and the best security usually is that way, right?
Exactly.
The least obtrusive. And you don't really kind of feel it. You see it in its most obvious fashion because you see police in their uniforms and you see guns, which, the kind of weaponry that's been around here the last couple of days is unlike what we normally see. But during this ceremony, it was kind of understated, but it was obvious. You could kind of see it on rooftops and people with binoculars searching the crowd and officers everywhere looking into the crowd, but not sort of in the way. Nobody seemed to be upset about it.
No. I thought they let the crowd as far forward as possible. Everybody seemed in a very good mood.
Right.
Or solemn mood. The Tomb of the Unknown Soldier does remind us, too, we had a report earlier from the Menin Gate in Brussels, in Belgium, that how many of our soldiers who were lost overseas, their graves were never found. The Menin Gate records 55,000 Commonwealth soldiers who had no known resting place. They were lost in the mud of Flanders. And it's that added loss of often not knowing where our young men lied after the wars.
And this tomb is for exactly that purpose, right? To remember all of those who were lost with no known grave. And if you visit the cemeteries that are in Europe from both wars, you will often see tombstones that read that these remains, the name of which are unknown.
Or known unto God.
Known only unto God, right. Brian, thank you for your help, as always, through our broadcast this week, and also to Evan Solomon, Hannah Thibodeau, and Diana Swain, and for the remarkable work, obviously, always of our technical gurus in trying to capture this moment here in the nation's capital. It has been a very special one. Just some quick reminders. Obviously, throughout the day on CBC News Network, we will be bringing you Remembrance Day coverage, not only from Ottawa, but from across the country. Your supper hour newscast will have summaries of what happened, and the National will as well. And if I can make just one more reminder of our very special documentary, Canada's Soldier, tonight at 8 o'clock, 8:30 in Newfoundland on CBC television. It is a very special documentary. I think you'll want to see it. If you get the opportunity, please do. I'm Peter Mansbridge in Ottawa. Thanks for watching. Goodbye for now.